The foundation of a resilient and unshakable mind begins with one undeniable truth of neuroscience: the brain can change. This is known as neuroplasticity, the ability of neural circuits to rewire in response to experience, behavior, emotion, and thought. This concept flips the old belief that our mental traits like willpower, confidence, emotional regulation, or focus are fixed. They're not. They're trainable, adaptable, and highly responsive to how we live, think, and challenge ourselves. Neuroplasticity means your brain is not a static organ. It is a learning machine. Every moment you choose focus over distraction, courage over comfort, or patience over reactivity, you are subtly sculpting the wiring of your brain. Neurons that fire together, wire together. That's not just a saying, it's a principle. When you repeat a thought or behavior, you strengthen the neural pathway associated with it. Eventually, what once felt hard, like staying calm under pressure or persevering through discomfort, starts to feel more natural. What you once struggled to believe about yourself becomes your default perspective. Mental resilience becomes not just a choice, but a trait. That's neuroplasticity at work. To understand this more deeply, it helps to know that the brain has several key areas involved in mental resilience. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, focus, and regulating impulses, strengthens through intentional practice. The amygdala, which processes fear and threat, can become less reactive when exposed to calculated stress and reflective control. The hippocampus, important for memory and learning, responds positively to both cognitive stimulation and emotional regulation. These brain structures are not fixed at birth. They change based on how we use them. For example, consider someone who practices staying calm during stressful situations. Perhaps they begin with short meditative exercises like slow breathing or cold exposure and slowly build tolerance. Over time, the prefrontal cortex becomes more dominant in those moments, meaning it can override the reactive signals of the amygdala. That person is literally rewiring their brain to be more composed in chaos. That isn't positive thinking. It's biology being reshaped by experience. The key is that neuroplasticity doesn't care whether you're growing stronger or reinforcing weakness. It simply responds to repetition. So if someone repeatedly avoids hard things, gives in to negative self-talk, or chooses distraction over focus, their brain will adapt to that too. Those patterns become reinforced, even if they feel disempowering. This is why awareness and intention matter. The brain is always learning. The question is, what are you teaching it? This is where the concept of mental training becomes powerful. Just like lifting weights builds muscle, deliberate mental practices strengthen cognitive circuits. These can include daily routines that challenge your discipline, reading difficult material to stretch your thinking, or reflecting on failure to build emotional regulation. These practices engage neuroplastic mechanisms and make you more adaptable, focused, and resilient over time. You won't necessarily feel stronger after one day, but over weeks and months, the changes compound. You're literally becoming someone else, someone harder to intimidate, harder to shake, and harder to doubt. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and stress management play a critical role in supporting neuroplasticity. Deep sleep, for instance, is when a lot of synaptic pruning and memory consolidation happens. That's the brain trimming unneeded connections and strengthening the ones you use most. Without proper sleep, the brain's ability to rewire weakens, and you're more likely to fall back into old habits. Physical activity also increases brain-directed neurotrophic factor, BDNF, a protein essential for learning and brain growth. So yes, movement improves mental strength, not just by building your body, but by creating the internal chemical environment for your brain to grow. The power of neuroplasticity lies in this truth. Your mind is not a finished product, it is a project. It's not about being born with discipline or confidence. It's about training your brain to produce those traits, to reinforce them, and to express them under pressure. And that training happens moment by moment, choice by choice. Every day you wake up and push past your limits, you're not just trying hard, you're physically changing the structure of your brain. You are creating a mind that doesn't flinch when life gets loud. You are hardwiring resilience. You are building a mind so strong it doesn't just endure doubt, it silences it. Stress has been misunderstood for decades. Most people see it as the enemy, a signal that something is wrong, a force to be avoided, suppressed, or escaped. But this view is incomplete. Stress, when properly understood and applied, is not a threat. It is a tool. More specifically, it is one of the brain's most powerful mechanisms for growth and adaptation. The key is learning how to use it intentionally instead of being controlled by it. At the biological level, stress is a signal. When your brain perceives a challenge, whether physical, emotional, or cognitive, it activates a cascade of responses to help you rise to that challenge. Hormones like cortisol and adrenaline surge, your focus narrows, energy is redirected to systems that support action. This state, known as sympathetic arousal, is not inherently negative. In fact, it's essential for survival and performance. What matters is duration and interpretation. Short bursts of stress, also called acute stress, can enhance memory, increase neuroplasticity, and sharpen attention. For example, when you lift weights, your muscles experience stress. That stress is necessary to stimulate growth. The same principle applies to the brain. Mental challenges, a tight deadline, a difficult conversation, a controlled fear-inducing situation are neural resistance. When embraced deliberately, they make your mind stronger. You become more adaptable, more responsive, and more mentally tough. It's chronic, unmanaged stress that causes harm. When stress becomes prolonged and uncontrolled, when there's no rest, no reflection, and no return to balance, the system breaks down. That's when cortisol levels remain elevated, impairing memory, weakening immune response, and disrupting sleep. So the goal is not to eliminate stress altogether, but to develop the ability to engage with it intentionally and recover properly afterward. That's what separates people who crumble under pressure from those who grow from it. What's often overlooked is that your mindset towards stress significantly shapes how it affects you. Research shows that when people believe stress is harmful, it amplifies its negative effects. But when they view stress as a performance enhancer, as a challenge instead of a threat, the body responds more efficiently. Blood vessels stay more relaxed. Recovery is faster and confidence builds. This mental reframe transforms stress from a destructive force into a training ground for resilience. You can apply this in daily life through what might be called stress inoculation. This means exposing yourself to manageable doses of stress in order to expand your capacity for handling pressure. Cold exposure is a classic example. The shock of cold water triggers the stress response, but learning to breathe through it teaches the brain that discomfort can be endured. The same applies to public speaking, high-stakes decision-making, or physical exertion. By leaning into these moments, you teach your nervous system to stay regulated under load. This is not just willpower, it's rewiring your stress circuits through real experience. In fact, the brain becomes more efficient at returning to baseline with practice. The vagus nerve, which helps calm the body after stress, strengthens with repetition. This means that each time you confront discomfort, recover, and reflect, you are improving your ability to regulate your own internal environment. Over time, you respond to stress not with panic, but with presence. That is a hallmark of a strong mind, not one that avoids pressure, but one that knows how to function inside of it. Of course, recovery is just as important as exposure. Stress must be followed by rest to allow for integration and growth. Techniques like deep breathing, mindfulness, physical activity, and high-quality sleep help restore balance to the nervous system. These aren't luxuries. They are part of the training. Just as a muscle needs time to repair after being strained, your mind needs structured downtime to consolidate gains. That's how you become stronger, not just tougher. In the end, what terrifies people is not a person who has never known stress, but one who has mastered it. A mind that sees chaos and remains clear. A person who doesn't collapse under pressure, but grows sharper inside it. That kind of presence doesn't come from avoiding stress. It comes from engaging it wisely, intentionally, and repeatedly. So stress, when embraced deliberately and managed skillfully, becomes one of your most powerful allies. It doesn't weaken you, it reveals you. And if you train for it, stress becomes the tool that forges a mind so resilient, so focused, and so grounded that it no longer fears adversity, it uses it. Focus is not just a tool, it is the foundation of mental strength. It is the cognitive currency that every other form of growth and resilience depends on. The quality of your focus determines the quality of your actions, your thinking, your problem solving, and ultimately your life. In a world overloaded with distraction and noise, developing the ability to sustain focus is one of the most powerful and rare mental skills a person can have. It separates those who are reactive from those who are intentional. It separates confusion from clarity, and it separates potential from performance. From a neuroscience perspective, focus is the activation and coordination of specific neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse control. When you focus, your brain filters out irrelevant information and allocates its energy toward a single point of attention. This is not passive. It's metabolically expensive. It takes energy and effort to focus. But with practice, the circuits responsible for attention can be strengthened, just like a muscle. Most people assume they lack focus, when in reality they have simply trained themselves to fragment it. Every time you pick up your phone in the middle of a task, check notifications, switch tabs, or allow yourself to be pulled by minor interruptions, you're reinforcing a scattered attentional pattern. The brain follows patterns of use. If distraction is repeated, it becomes default. This means that training focus requires more than just occasional concentration. It requires unlearning habits of reactivity and replacing them with intentional, sustained attention. One of the most effective ways to build focus is through what researchers call deep work, periods of uninterrupted, high concentration effort on a meaningful task. During these sessions, the brain shifts into a state where cognitive performance and memory encoding are significantly enhanced. Distractions are minimized and attention is fully absorbed. These sessions don't just produce better results, they strengthen the brain's ability to maintain attention in future tasks. It is a compounding effect. The more often you practice full focus, the more natural and accessible it becomes. Focus also plays a central role in emotional regulation. When under stress or threat, the brain naturally wants to scatter attention. It's a survival mechanism to scan for danger. But training yourself to direct focus inward, toward breath, toward a task, or toward a mental anchor, creates a different pattern. It tells your nervous system that you are in control. Over time, this habit of centered attention reduces reactivity and increases composure. A focused mind becomes a calm mind, not because the world is quiet, but because it has learned how to ignore the noise. Attention also determines meaning. Whatever you focus on becomes more emotionally significant. If you focus on a mistake, you reinforce self-doubt. If you focus on effort, you reinforce resilience. This is why people with high mental strength are not just focused, they are strategically focused. They choose what to amplify and what to discard. They direct attention like a spotlight rather than letting it flicker and fade according to external triggers. That's not just discipline. That's neurological control developed through intentional effort. The connection between focus and self-identity is profound. Every time you follow through on something hard without distraction, whether it's finishing a workout, writing a page, or studying deeply, you are reinforcing a self-image. I am someone who finishes. I am someone who persists. I am someone who pays attention. An identity built through action is far more durable than identity based on hope or affirmation. Focus is what makes that action possible. Even simple practices can strengthen focus. Breath control, time blocking, removing digital distractions, or simply pausing before shifting attention from one task to another. These small moments of conscious direction accumulate into stronger neural patterns. Over time, your ability to control where your attention goes becomes automatic. And once you have control of your attention, you have control of your mind. Mental strength is not loud. It is not aggressive. Often it is quiet, a steady, unwavering ability to stay present, to hold attention in the face of pressure, and to remain locked in on what matters. That's what terrifies people. A person so dialed in, so immune to distraction, that they don't flinch or chase noise. Their presence feels different because it is different. Focus has shaped their mind into something sharp, calm, and unshakable. In the end, where your attention goes, your life goes. If you want a strong mind, start by mastering your focus. It's not just a skill, it's a commitment to your future self. Most people wait to feel confident before taking action. They wait to feel motivated before committing to change. They believe they need to become someone mentally strong before acting like it. But this thinking is backwards. The truth is this: identity is not something you discover, it is something you build. And it is built through repeated action. You don't need to feel strong to act with strength. You need to act with strength consistently, and over time, that behavior shapes your self-premiere. Identity follows action, not the other way around. At the psychological and neurological levels, identity is formed by patterns of behavior, patterns of thought, and patterns of emotional response. The brain, in its constant drive for efficiency, looks for recurring signals to determine what kind of person you are. If you repeatedly avoid discomfort, the brain encodes, "I am someone who backs down." If you consistently do what you say you'll do, even in small things, your brain encodes, "I am someone who follows through." Over time, these patterns become the foundation of how you perceive yourself, and that perception determines your choices moving forward. This means every small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every early morning, when you get out of bed instead of hitting snooze, is a vote for discipline. Every moment you focus deeply instead of scrolling mindlessly is a vote for mental clarity. Every time you speak the truth instead of hiding behind comfort, you reinforce the identity of someone who is courageous. These small votes compound. They form the architecture of your mind. You are not simply acting, you are building. From a neuroscience perspective, the brain doesn't care what you intend. It cares what you repeat. Neural circuits strengthen through repetition, not desire. If you want to be someone who is mentally strong, the pathway starts with doing hard things consistently. Each act of courage, composure, or control lays down physical traces in your brain, synaptic connections that make that action easier the next time. And the more often you do it, the more automatic it becomes. The behavior comes first, the belief comes after. This also explains why people often feel stuck. They are waiting for internal change before making external changes. But it rarely works that way. Action disrupts mental inertia. When you act in a way that contradicts your current self-position, for example, calmly handling a situation even though you used to panic, you introduce a contradiction that the brain wants to resolve. Over time, with enough consistent contradiction, the old identity weakens and a new one emerges. It's not instant, but it is inevitable if you persist. It's also important to understand that identity is not just personal. It's social. The people around you respond to your patterns. If you consistently show up with presence, purpose, and integrity, others begin to expect that from you. They reflect back that image. And that feedback loop reinforces your new identity. You become someone who doesn't just act with strength. You are seen that way. And the more others see it, the more you believe it. That's how social reinforcement deepens internal change. But none of this is possible without action. Not feelings, not motivation, not declarations, action. It's through doing, over and over, that the brain begins to understand, this is who I am now. You don't need to fully believe it at the beginning, you just need to show up and act as if it's true. Over time, the belief will catch up to the behavior. This is the path to becoming unshakable. You don't become mentally strong by simply consuming information or hyping yourself up. You become mentally strong by consistently doing hard things, keeping promises to yourself, and training your nervous system to stay grounded under pressure. That repeated doing reshapes how your brain perceives challenge, risk, and discomfort. You stop being someone who fears hard things and start becoming someone who thrives in them. Not because you changed overnight, but because you proved it to yourself again and again. In the end, you don't build a strong mind by thinking differently. You build it by acting differently, especially when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Those actions become habits, those habits become traits, and those traits become identity. So if you want to be the kind of person who's unshakable, stop waiting to feel ready. Start doing what strong minds do. The rest will follow. Mental strength is often associated with discipline, willpower, or the ability to push through adversity. But the truth is, no matter how disciplined or determined you are, Your brain cannot function at its peak without proper recovery and regulation. You cannot force a strong mind into existence by simply pushing harder. The foundation of mental resilience is not just how you act under pressure, but how you recover from it. And for that, 3 pillars are non-negotiable: sleep, movement, and stillness. Sleep is the biological reset button for the brain. During deep sleep, the brain clears out metabolic waste through a system known as the glymphatic system, consolidates memory, and rebalances neurotransmitter levels. Without enough quality sleep, cognitive function suffers, focus declines, emotional regulation weakens. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, logic, and impulse control, becomes sluggish, while the amygdala, the region responsible for threat detection and emotional reactivity, becomes more active. In other words, without sleep, you literally become more reactive, less rational, and more emotionally unstable. A mind without rest is a mind without strength. But sleep is not just about quantity, it's about rhythm. Consistent sleep and wake times anchor your circadian rhythm, which governs everything from energy levels to hormone release to mental clarity. A strong mind is not just alert, it's in sync with its biological rhythm. That alignment gives you access to deeper focus, better memory, and stronger emotional resilience. Sleep is not a passive act, it is a strategic investment in your mental capacity. Movement is equally essential. Physical activity changes brain chemistry. It increases blood flow to the brain, delivering more oxygen and nutrients. It stimulates the release of brain-secreted neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which supports neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and learn new behaviors. Regular exercise also reduces stress hormones like cortisol and increases mood-regulating neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. This biochemical shift improves mood, increases energy, and enhances cognitive flexibility, all critical components of mental strength. Movement doesn't have to mean extreme workouts. Even simple, consistent activity, walking, stretching, breath-based movement, can recalibrate your nervous system. When your body moves, your mind shifts. Stagnation in the body often creates stagnation in thought, but when you move regularly, your mental energy becomes more fluid, more adaptable, and more resilient. Many people try to solve mental problems by thinking more, when sometimes the most effective solution is to move more. A moving body supports a thinking brain. Stillness, though often overlooked, is just as vital. We live in a world that constantly demands attention, notifications, noise, stimulation, and very rarely do we allow the mind space to process and integrate experience. But it is in stillness that insight happens. It is in stillness that the nervous system rebalances. Practices like meditation, controlled breathing, or even quiet reflection activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the nervous system responsible for rest, recovery, and emotional regulation. Stillness is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's active restoration. It's the practice of creating internal space so that thoughts are not just reactions, but responses. It allows the mind to become less cluttered, more deliberate, and more clear. People with strong minds don't just act fast. They pause, they reflect, they choose. That ability to create space between stimulus and response is a product of stillness. The synergy between these 3 pillars, sleep, movement, and stillness, forms the biological and psychological infrastructure of mental strength. When these are optimized, you make better decisions, think more clearly, recover faster from stress, and respond to challenges with greater composure. Without them, even the most motivated mind will falter, because strength is not only about how much you can handle, but about how well you restore, rebuild, and recalibrate. Discipline is not just about doing more, it's about knowing what matters most. And what matters most is that your brain is given what it needs to function at its best. If you want to be calm under pressure, focused in chaos, and sharp in uncertainty, you must start with the basics. You must sleep deeply, move consistently, and sit in stillness regularly. These aren't luxuries, they're the prerequisites for mental dominance. A strong mind isn't forged only in moments of fire. It's built in the quiet hours, in the recovery, in the reset. And when these habits become a lifestyle, strength is no longer a state you visit, it becomes who you are. One of the greatest myths about mental strength is that it means never having doubt. That's not true. Doubt is part of being human. It will show up in moments of uncertainty, challenge, and discomfort. But mentally strong people aren't controlled by that doubt. They don't let it decide how they act, how they think, or how they see themselves. And the reason they can hold their ground is not because they're fearless, it's because they've learned to master their self-dialogue. They've trained their inner voice to become a guide, not a critic, a coach, not a saboteur. The way you speak to yourself is one of the most powerful influences on your mental state. Every thought you repeat, every belief you reinforce, becomes a thread in the story your brain tells itself about who you are. And the brain listens. It adjusts your emotions, your expectations, and your physiological responses based on the tone and content of your self-talk. If that voice is full of hesitation, negativity, and self-judgment, your body reacts accordingly. Focus narrows, tension increases, confidence drops. But when your inner dialogue is clear, constructive, and grounded, your mind remains steady, even when circumstances aren't. Self-dialogue is not something you're born with, it's something you can shape. And most people's internal voice is shaped unconsciously by early experiences, failure, fear, and social influence, but with awareness and repetition, that inner voice can be retrained. It starts with observing it. Most people are so fused with their thoughts that they never stop to question them. But mental strength begins when you step back and recognize, just because I'm thinking something doesn't mean it's true. Just because a thought feels familiar doesn't mean it's helpful. When doubt arises, and it will, your response to it is what defines your mindset. Weak minds believe doubt and obey it. Strong minds question it and move through it. And this isn't about blindly replacing negative thoughts with fake positivity. It's about speaking to yourself with truth, precision, and authority. It's about acknowledging fear without letting it lead. It's saying, yes, this is hard, and I've done hard things before, or I don't feel ready, but I've prepared. I'm capable of learning as I go. That kind of language is honest, but empowering. It doesn't ignore difficulty, it puts you in a position of control within it. Neuroscience supports this. Studies show that the way we talk to ourselves during stress directly affects performance. Athletes, military operators, performers, and leaders who use task-focused, encouraging self-talk consistently outperform those who allow unfiltered inner chaos. The reason is simple. Words shape perception, and perception shapes outcomes. Your brain responds to language. If you tell yourself you're falling apart, your nervous system will believe you. If you tell yourself to breathe, focus, and handle one step at a time, your body shifts into action mode instead of panic. Training this skill means practicing it daily, not just during high-pressure moments. The repetition of clear, firm self-talk builds new neural pathways. It makes the inner voice more automatic. You can build it through journaling, mental rehearsal, or short affirmations linked to behavior. For example, repeating, "I follow through" while you complete tasks, or "I remain calm under pressure during moments of stress," can condition the brain to link that language with action. It's not about magic, it's about repetition and neuroplasticity. Over time, the voice in your head becomes a steady force, not loud or dramatic, but steady, the kind of voice that doesn't panic when things get uncertain, the kind of voice that silences doubt, not by shouting, but by calmly stating what's true. When this voice becomes dominant, your decisions improve. You stop spiraling, you stay focused. You trust yourself not because everything is perfect, but because you've built a relationship with your mind based on consistency and truth. Ultimately, silencing doubt doesn't mean it disappears forever. It means it loses power over you. And that happens when the voice in your head becomes one of discipline, clarity, and self-leadership. A voice that you've trained to speak to you, not against you. That kind of voice can't be faked. It's earned. It's built in thousands of small moments. When you choose courage over comfort, effort over ease, and truth over fear, that's what gives you the kind of internal power that doesn't just resist doubt, it overrides it. That's the kind of voice that builds a mind so strong, it doesn't need to argue with insecurity. It simply continues forward, unshaken.